started a Facebook page. She was fed up, she was frustrated with all of the gun violence in our country, and so she started a Facebook page. It caught on like crazy. Within a month, Shannon Watts was on the cover of Newsweek. She had joined forces with Michael Bloomberg with Every Town for Gun Safety. They became our umbrella organization. And we've been growing by leaps and bounds ever since. We now have 10 million supporters across the country. We have chapters in every state. We are taking on the NRA, and we are making them huge. It's incredibly empowering. So, like I said, my name is Courtney. I am a Bloomington resident. I live here with my 3 boys and my husband. I have a 15-year-old, in a few days, a 13-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And part of the reason why I do this is for them. I've led the local chapter here in Bloomington for several years. I am now also, I work at the state level. I'm one of the co-state leads, and I'm also the state chapter trainer. We are all volunteers. Nobody gets paid for this work. We all volunteer our time, so it can be interesting at times. So I'm going to begin by outlining the state of gun violence in America. And it's true, the statistics are staggering. The US has the highest rate of gun ownership among high-income countries, and also the highest homicide rate. So this clearly punches a hole, right, in the argument that more guns make you safer, because if that were the case, we would be the safest nation in the world. And as you can see from this chart, I know it's very small and I apologize. I'll be happy to send this to anybody if you want to take a closer look at it. But clearly, we're not the safest nation in the world. And all of these statistics that I'm going to show you today can be found online. If you want more information and a closer look, you can look at everytownstats.org, and everytown.org has also a huge research on. But the truth is, we don't have to live like this. So every day, 120 Americans are killed with guns, and this number keeps rising. Every time I give a presentation about gun violence, I need to update this number. And that's completely unacceptable. When I began as a volunteer 8.5 years ago, I'm pretty sure the number was 92 Americans were killed every day. And so every year it's going up. Gun violence is not getting better in our country. And keep in mind that for every person who is shot and killed with a gun, there are 2 more who are shot and injured and survive. And these are not injuries that you shake off. They are life-altering, and they can debilitate you, of course, and completely affect every nuance of your life. We don't have to live like this. So I like to think of gun violence as a public health issue, and it affects many areas of our lives. We hear a lot about mass shootings and school shootings. Those get a lot of attention because, of course, they're tragic and they're horrifying. They get glamorized in the press. Those are only a small percentage, though, of the shootings that happen daily across our nation. So as you can see, 59% of adults or someone they know or care about have experienced gun violence in their lifetime. Sorry. Gun violence has daily repercussions in the issues of race, domestic violence, suicide, and unintentional shootings. So when I became a volunteer, it was in reaction to the Sandy Hook shootings, because I did not want to have to worry about sending my children to school and suffering a school shooting like that. I stayed a volunteer once I learned about how gun violence affects all these other areas of life. And when we talk about gun violence, we absolutely need to discuss its disproportionate toll on our communities of color. Every day on average, 30 Black Americans are killed by guns, and more than 110 experience non-fatal injuries. At least every other day, a Black person is shot and killed by police, and these trends worsen in large cities where Black Americans make up 68% of homicide victims. We don't have to live like this. Gun violence is also a woman's issue. Women in the US are 16 times more likely to be killed with a gun than women in other high-income countries. So to put it another way, this is an old statistic, but it's pretty shocking, so I left it in. 90% of all women killed with guns in high-income countries in 2010 were from the United States. Nearly 1 million women alive today have been shot or shot at by an intimate partner. And the number goes up dramatically when you include threats made with a gun. For those that survive even a threat of gun violence, they have been found to suffer more severe psychological symptoms than women who have endured other types of abuse. Suicide, on the other hand, ends up affecting white men more than anyone else. 2/3 of firearm deaths are suicides, with nearly 22,000 Americans shooting and killing themselves. So I want to make this point clear, though, because this is pretty staggering. Most people who attempt suicide are not successful unless they use a gun. 85% of suicides involving a gun result in death, compared with less than 5% involving other means. And studies have also shown that people who survive a suicide attempt don't make a second attempt for the most part. So that is an opportunity, a second chance that people who use a gun don't get. And so it's clear that access to firearms drives this number up. People who live in states with a high rate of gun ownership are 4 times as likely to die from firearm suicide than those living in states with a low rate of gun ownership. It's important to someone who has died by using a gun on him or herself is to recognize that they are also a victim of gun violence. And so that's why we don't use the term committed when we're talking about suicide. It can be stigmatizing to suicide survivors and can silence them and bring shame to them. We don't want to imply any shame to them because their loved ones were victims also. So it's a word that's often used in connection with crime. So we try to say died by suicide with a gun. This is one of the most upsetting statistics because firearms are now the leading cause of death for American children and teens. Nearly 5,000 children and teens ages 0 to 19 are shot and killed every year, and 15,600 are shot and injured. In addition, it's estimated that 3 million anymore, it's 4.6 million American children witness gun violence every year and live in homes with guns that are left unloaded and unlocked. So contrary to the storyline that the 24-hour news cycle will imply, the place where a child is most at risk of being shot is not in school, it's at home, with the majority of gun-related deaths due to domestic violence situations. And what we do know is that our nation's gun violence crisis is taking an emotional toll on our young people. 75% of high school students cited mass shootings as a primary source of stress. And when students are exposed to a homicide, school absences soar and test scores temporarily plummet. We don't have to live like this. So as you can see, Indiana has some of the weakest gun laws in the country. Our state legislature is not in favor of gun safety laws. Despite being one of the first states to enact an extreme risk law, Indiana has no law that requires background checks on unlicensed gun sales. Its laws intended to keep away domestic abusers are dangerously incomplete, and schools can legally arm teachers in Indiana. And just last year, our state legislature repealed the permitting system for carrying a firearm in public. And we know that that leads to increased gun violence, and we've already been seeing the numbers are going up. We're fortunate that right now, only 4 school districts in Indiana have opted to arm their teachers. That's 4 out of many. I don't know how many school districts we have. However, right now in our legislature, we have a bill that's already passed out of the House that is proposing to provide funding to train teachers in firearms. And that is abhorrent to us because that will actually encourage, thank you so much. That will actually encourage school districts to arm their teachers then. And they'll say, well, they're trained, sure, we might as well let them carry. We cannot let that happen. We need to contact our state legislatures about that. So I talked a little bit at the beginning about who is Moms Demand Action. Before we go any further, I'd like to give you a little bit more background about who we are and what we do. So we're a part of the National Gun Violence Prevention Movement. There are several organizations in the country. There's the Sandy Hook Promise, there's Giffords, there's the Brady Campaign. We are all working with the same purpose and the same goal in mind, which is to reduce that number that I told you of 120 Americans dying every day. We're not anti-gun. We are anti-gun violence. We have many people in our organization who aren't just moms. We have dads, we have families who don't have children, we have grandparents whose children are grown, we have gun owners, we have conservatives, liberals, we have everybody who just want to see a safer world for our families and our communities. We do support the Second Amendment, but we know that it also goes hand in hand with common sense gun laws. Right? With great responsibility with great power comes great responsibility. Same should go with our firearms. We are a counterweight to the gun lobby. We don't go after gun owners or NRA members. We go after the NRA leadership. So one of our priorities is to keep guns out of dangerous hands. Domestic abusers, people with convicted violent felonies, people under the age of 21, we feel none of those people should have access to firearms. We don't use words like ban, restrict, control, or confiscate. That's pretty upsetting for gun owners. It does smack of some sort of, we're coming for your guns. We want to make it very clear to them that they can own their guns sensibly and safely. So instead of saying gun control, we say gun sense laws. When we talk about people with mental illness, we say people with dangerous mental illness rather than dangerously mental ill people. Because we know for the most part, people who commit acts of gun violence are not mentally ill. Mentally ill people are not a danger, right? That doesn't make you more likely to go out and harm people. We don't want to stigmatize mental illness. We avoid naming the shooters when there is a mass shooting. We often implore the media, please do not show their picture, please do not say their name. No notoriety is what we often request, because we know that that can be appealing to some people. We prefer commenting on maybe the 1-year mark of an event rather than saying an anniversary. An anniversary is a celebratory word, so we talk about the 1-year mark instead, or the 10-year mark we just observed with Sandy Hook. And we never say universal background checks without including the word gun. Criminal background checks is preferable. So fun fact, less than 20% of Americans ever contact their elected official about any topic. They want to hear from us. They need to hear from us. We need to let them know how we feel about legislative issues. And so one of the big things that we do as an organization is we do lobby and advocate with our legislators. I just spent last week, I spent the day up at the State House. It was our advocacy day. And people from all over the state descended in their red shirts. We got together, we had a little bit of a training session and a rally to make sure we were all on the same page with the proposed bills that we're looking at this session, right? The ones that we support and the ones that we're against. And then we go and we speak to our legislators and we lobby them and advocate and we tell them, hey, here's why we don't support this bill. This will make people unsafe and here's why. They need to hear from us. They also need to hear from us though on the good things that we do support. One of our allies in the State House, Senator J.D. Ford, I believe he's from the Noblesville area, he told us a few years ago, he really, really needs us to reach out when there's a bill that we're in favor of. Even if we're positive he's going to vote in favor of it, he still needs that on record that we support it, because then he can go back to the people who are against it in the State House and say, but look how many people called me, look how many people emailed me, they want this. They need those numbers so that they can make a really strong argument on the State House floor. So like I said, we like to lobby, we like to advocate, but what does that actually look like when we do that? So this is what my friends think I do when I say that I'm going to the State House to advocate for gun sense laws. This is what my parents think I do when I talk about going to the State House. This is what the NRA likes to say that we do when we go to the State House. And this is what society tends to think that we do when we talk about lobbying at the State House. The truth of the matter is, this is what I do. This was a picture of me a few years ago at a community picnic. I knew that several of our local lawmakers were going to be there. Then Senator Joe Donnelly was there, and so I went over and I talked to him about some federal bills that I supported, and I was hoping that he would support too. And this is one of the best ways to get your legislators' ears. So, not only do we work with our legislators, and they know us at the State House, right? They see our shirts, and one legislator said, one of my fellow volunteers overheard as they were walking into the State House, "Oh, good, the moms are here.
The moms are here.
It's a long day." But we show up every time they are hearing a bill, and if they're asking for testimony, we give testimony on it. Whenever any gun bill is going through the State House, we have at least one person in a red shirt there letting them know that we're watching and we're holding them accountable. So aside from that, though, we have a few campaigns with our organization that we like to use for educational purposes. One of them, probably the jewel in our crown, is our Be Smart campaign. So it's a program that we developed that is for adults, anybody interested in keeping children safe from gun violence. And so we give presentations specifically about Be Smart. We have lots of literature that we hand out about it. We have been working with our school board, with MCCSC, to get this information into all of our schools. Just last month, they proclaimed a safe storage resolution that we drafted. And we've been working with them on this for a few years, trying to get them to this point, and they did, and it was really thrilling that it's going to be in all the handbooks, it's going to be on their websites for each school. So this is really exciting because the Be Smart program is about safe storage. So SMART is an acronym. And so this is how we help remember the steps to keeping children safe from gun violence, right? So the S is secure your guns in all homes and vehicles. The premise of this accepts the reality that families are going to own guns. We can't stop them. All we can do is ask them to please do it safely. So when we're asking them to secure all of their guns, to keep them unloaded with their firearm locked and their ammunition locked separately, because we know that kids are curious and they're going to explore, right? And they're going to get into things that they know they shouldn't get into. So hiding a firearm at the top of your closet in a shoebox is not effective. 80% of children 10 and under know where their adults hide their guns, and the adults don't have any idea that the kids know this. And so we know that they're impulsive, and I know my kids get into things. I can't have a box of cookies in the house without them disappearing within, 12 hours. So they get into things they know they're not supposed to. So part of encouraging this safe storage, we pass out free gun locks. We have a wonderful relationship with Bloomington Police Department, and they've donated many, many boxes of gun locks to us. And we pass them out when we go table, and they go like hotcakes. People are eager for safe storage. Gun owners want to be responsible. The M in SMART is model responsible behavior. So let the children see that you are being responsible with your gun by locking it up. They know you have it. Let them see that you're being safe with it. Ask about unsecured guns in other homes. So this one applies to me. I'm not a gun owner. But I do ask every time my children go into anybody else's home and I'm not going to be there, even if it's a family member, I ask, hey, out of curiosity, do you have a gun? And how is it stored? Sometimes I'll do it, with other information. Oh, just so you know, my son doesn't have any allergies, he's a little bit afraid of big dogs. We don't have a gun in our home. How about you? I've never had a bad reaction. Excuse me. And in fact, most people that I've had that conversation with have said, what a great question. I never thought to ask that. I'm going to ask. And I have had people who surprise me and say, we do have a gun in the home. Here's how we store it. And I've never had to say, well, my kid can't go there. And it got a little awkward when I had to text my husband's cousin at Thanksgiving time when we were going, because I knew they owned a lot of guns. But her answer satisfied me. So, the R is recognize the role of guns in suicides, which we talked a bit about earlier, right? But especially when you have teenagers in the home. Teenagers are also very impulsive. They have a bad day, they can do something that they regret very quickly, and so, or that they don't get the opportunity to regret, right? And so that's one of the reasons that it is really, really important to lock up your guns. And then the T is tell your peers to be smart, right? Tell everybody you know, tell young parents, tell, even if they're not gun owners, hey, ask about sending your kids, when they go over to a new play date. Let them look up Be Smart on, we have a whole webpage, besmart.org. Another very important campaign of ours is called One Thing You Can Do. And this is one to help raise the awareness of red flag laws, which those are designed to keep people who are in crisis safe and to keep the people around them safe. So it pertains to the firearms search and seizures. And most people don't realize that we have red flag laws here in Indiana. So the way that it works, excuse me. The way that it works is that if somebody recognizes that a loved one is in crisis and they're worried that they're going to do something dangerous with their gun, either to themselves or to other people, they can go to the police and let them know their concerns. The police can then go to a judge and they get a warrant to temporarily remove the firearms from this person. And then the person is assessed while their firearms are held safely away from them, and they can have their firearms restored to them once they are deemed no longer a threat. Indiana was one of the early adopters of this. Before Parkland, there were only 5 states that had red flag laws. We happened to be one of them. So I'm pretty proud that we were that forward thinking in it. Unfortunately, it's not as strong as it could be. There's nothing preventing the person right now. There's no law preventing the person from just going out and buying another firearm while their firearms have been removed. So we need to strengthen our gun laws in that regard. I believe one of the bills going through the House right now, too, is to weaken our red flag laws, which just is shocking. I keep saying it, but we don't have to live like this. So this is the Everytown Action Plan. As I mentioned at the beginning, Everytown for Gun Safety is our umbrella organization. And they have 5 policy priorities that would make a huge impact on gun violence, right? And so these are the areas where we tend to focus most on when we're doing our work. We advocate for better background checks. People will tell you, but we already have background checks. You have to get a background check. Yes, that's true. When you buy from a licensed gun dealer, you do have to get a background check. When you buy from an unlicensed gun dealer, though, all bets are off. You can go to a gun show. You can just buy from Craigslist. You can buy out of the trunk of somebody's car in the parking lot of the gun shop. Not all firearm exchanges require a background check at this point. Protecting kids and communities, as you've seen with our 2 campaigns, Be Smart and One Thing You Can Do, we are working toward protecting kids and communities by spreading education. Disarming of domestic abusers, as I said earlier, that is tremendously important. Combating daily gun violence and holding the gun industry accountable. We would love to start making them feel a little bit of responsibility for what they're putting out there in an irresponsible manner. So what can you do? If you only have 10 minutes, you can text the word ACT to 64433 to become connected with Moms Demand Action. And what we'll do then is we will keep you updated on maybe any local meetings that we have, any events that are going on, but also, hey, we really need you to call your legislator right now and tell them this and why, and here's their number. We make it really easy for people to contact their legislators. You can follow us on Facebook or on Twitter. We also happen to have a Bloomington Facebook group, which is going to be really, if you want to get involved at the local level, you can find us at Bloomington Moms Demand Action on Facebook. That's where we post everything that's going on. You can buy one of my fancy t-shirts and wear it when you run errands. I believe they're $30 at the Everytown store. They've been really popular since all of the shootings this summer, so I know they've been out of stock a little bit. But I wear this shirt, I have a couple of them, and I wear them every time there's a major incident in the news. And when I run my errands, I wear this around town, and people notice, and people talk to me about it, and people get information for what they can do. You can watch, there's a Be Smart video presentation on our besmartforkids.org website. And most importantly, you can call your lawmaker to share your feelings about everything that's happening this legislative session. Now is the time to do it while they're hearing the bills. So what will you do in the next week to speak out about gun violence? Those slides are out of order, I should have switched them. I'm going to open it up to questions, but first I do want to point out, this was our advocacy day in 2020, in January of 2020. This was our biggest turnout yet, and we had so many that we took up all 3 floors of the State House. I just love that picture because it shows the power that we have cultivated over the years. When we had our State House Advocacy Day last week, it was the first one in person since then, so it felt good to be back. So does anybody have any questions for me? Yes?
The red flag laws, they're there. How often do they get used? Because they take somebody to step up and say, I think this person's a danger, and then it takes a court order then to investigate and decide to take them out. How often do they actually use them? How many cases, I don't know if you keep that, but did somebody step up and say, I should have done something when it happens?
That's a really good question. I don't have numbers for how often it's used, but I know it's not used often enough because people don't know about it. A lot of people have no idea that these exist and that they can do something about it. And that's why we have that campaign to try to educate people about it. I know a few years ago when there was the FedEx shooting in Indianapolis, a red flag law could have intervened. And in fact, a red flag law had been triggered there, but I believe the local police didn't follow through. They didn't file the proper paperwork. So, unfortunately, that wasn't stopped. Yes?
I just want to say something as a point of information. The Second Amendment does not guarantee an individual to own a gun. It guarantees state militias to own guns. 2 court cases from the Supreme Court allow individuals to own guns. And most people think it's based on the Second Amendment. It is not.
I agree with you. Yes.
I'm not sure what those 2 Supreme Court decisions were based on. It has to be some point of law. Do you know what they are?
I don't. That's a very good question. But I mean, I agree with you. That is one point that drives me absolutely bonkers, is that I interpret it as the militia. Unfortunately, some people interpret it otherwise. I do know that in one of those rulings, though, in the 1990s, when they deemed, confirmed personal gun ownership, Justice Scalia did say, with common sense, that you had to have responsibility to it. So it wasn't no holds barred. But people love to conveniently overlook that point that he said that. Yes?
Odd question. Does Mother Man's action ever back moderate candidates for say that? I ask because I live in a horribly gerrymandered district. The chance of us getting a Democrat elected are 0.0. And I see too many times people I'm offered to choose from all of them have the NRAA plus. and I know my Democratic brethren would love for us to get a Democratic state rep, is not gonna happen in District 6. So,
We have backed Republicans before.
No.
We actually have a program that we introduced in the 2018 election, I believe it was. It's Gun Sense Candidate of Distinction. So the way that it works is that a candidate who is running for office can come to us and say, I want your seal of approval. I want you to label me as a gun sense candidate. So they apply with us. They have to fill out a questionnaire. And we send that questionnaire on to our team at Everytown at the national level. And they look over the questions and answers. And if their gun sense morals align with ours, we say, yes, welcome aboard. You are a gun sense candidate. And what that means then is they get our logo that they're welcome to use on their literature or not. Some candidates decide that it will ultimately hurt them, so they choose not to advertise that logo. I get it. But what it also means then is they have access to us as volunteers for their campaign. So then we are welcome and we encourage all of our local volunteers to go out and campaign for them. So yes, we have had Republicans on the state level in Indiana, excuse me, who have sought out this seal. It shocked us, but we were thrilled. Yeah, and we have several gun sense candidates in the state house right now. I don't think any Republicans. They're all Democrats right now in Indiana, but we do have a lot of gun sense candidates. We were thrilled in 2018 because we won the gun sense majority in the House, in Congress. We now have a gun sense majority in Senate. We have a gun sense president and a gun sense vice president. We have several gun sense lawmakers all the way down to our school board right now. So yes, we will support anybody because we're nonpartisan, but they just have to make us want to support them. Yes?
What kind of a reception did you and your colleagues receive the last advocacy day? How do state legislators respond to you when you?
We get quite a variety of responses, right? I got an enormous hug from Shelley Yoder. We get some more moderate Republicans who come out and they're happy to talk to us. And we're lucky if they'll take their picture with us and they'll listen. And thank you very much, have a good day. And then we do have some in the State House who are violently against us. Just, they don't like us and they let it be known. I don't think we had any incidents this year of lawmakers being just out and out nasty to us, but I don't know if anybody's familiar with Jim Lucas of Seymour. He's a state representative. He has many times taken to his Facebook page making fun of us. At this advocacy day, he took a picture of this over the shoulder of the person taking this picture and then posted something mocking us on his Facebook page. When I showed up to the State House last year to just be there the day that they were going to be repealing the permitting system, I got off the elevator with my 7-year-old holding my hand in my red shirt, and Representative Jerry Torr looked at me and he says, "Oh, you're here to see you fail today?" In front of my 7-year-old child. What a wonderful role model.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we get all sorts of different receptions. Yes?
So do you have the number of the House bill that's going to move to the Senate for the reducing the red flag law?
I don't.
Okay. Is it somewhere on the website, you think?
It would be on the legislative.
Yeah, it would be on the legislative, the Indiana State House website.
Yeah.
I can find it. I will admit, I've not been doing a good job keeping track of the numbers this session. Yeah, thank you.
Probably going to the Senate. Did it pass out of the House?
Yeah, it did. It was very disappointing. Yes.
What kind of support and community? I'm very concerned about all this putting or even forcing teachers to be trained and having.
It doesn't force them. It's if they want to carry a firearm. they can seek this federal funding. It almost passed a few years ago. I believe 4 years ago, it was up and it was sailing through, and it was because it uses federal funding, our tax dollars, to train these teachers. We were opposed to it because I think it was 40 hours of training they were offering, maybe 30, less than a police officer training. And we know that police officers only shoot, like they're only accurately hitting a moving target 25% of the time. And they train every day for this, right? And they spend tons of hours training. So a school teacher with 30 or 40 hours of training is expected to successfully take down somebody in their classroom and not hit an innocent bystander. That was horrifying. But the bill then did not require armed teachers to take the training. It was just, hey, it's here if you want it. This version, though, as of right now, and they may change it, does require, if you're going to be armed, you have to have taken this training. And so we're kind of put in a really awkward position with this. We're actually not, we're not coming out publicly for or against it. I wish we would come out publicly against it, but I do understand the optics are pretty bad. You know, then our opponents can say, look, they don't want teachers to be trained if they're going to fire, you know, if they're going to hold firearms. So they're putting us in a really sticky situation there. Did anybody else have questions? Yes.
Courtney, would you talk a little bit about the local work with the school district and how that came about?
Yeah, thanks. We had actually been trying to ally with them for a couple of years, you know, sending them emails and showing up at the school board and saying, hey, can you at least, because at the local level, there's not much that we can do. We can't enact any local gun laws. Our state legislature passed an ordinance several years ago saying specifically local communities cannot pass any gun-related laws. So unfortunately, you know, our mayor's hands are tied. So really all we can do is focus on safe storage at this point, right? Mm-hmm. And so we showed up a few times and we asked them if they could, hey, help us share the message of safe storage. And, oh, that's a great idea. And then it never really went anywhere. In 2018, there was an incident in one of the high schools where a student had a gun on campus. And thankfully, nobody was hurt. But again, it, you know, shook the community. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could give the Be Smart presentation to the school board? The problem is, you can't meet with them in private. You have to do it, you know, during public comments at one of their meetings, and you only get 3 minutes to speak, and the presentation is 20 minutes long. So about 8 of us got together, and I split up the presentation script into 3-minute segments, and we showed up, and we all signed up one right after the other in the order that we had to present. And we walked out of there that night with a promise that every single school had to somehow start incorporating the Be Smart program into their school. And so they did. That spring was so busy for us because we were tabling all the time. We were giving presentations in the schools. Some of the schools were putting the info on their websites. And that was wonderful. We've had a really wonderful relationship with them since then. But we thought, well, we can take it further. And so we had, about a year ago, we sent them a draft of a resolution for safe storage that we asked them to adopt. And it didn't really go anywhere. So we showed up again this December, and a few of us testified, and because there was another incident at a middle school, had been a threat. And so we talked about, there was also a group of parents that are advocating for rearming our security officers at the schools and for metal detectors, and so we knew we needed to be a counterweight to them. So we showed up and gave them statistics for why those were not actually effective ideas. And then we also asked again, hey, we sent you this resolution last year, would you look at it? So the superintendent called us a week later and said, hey, come to my office and meet with us. And when we walked in, he had the resolution printed out on his table, and he said, just so you know, we're presenting this next week at the meeting, and we're going to pass it. So that was so gratifying and validating, because because, you know, if on the state level we're not getting anywhere, at least we're getting somewhere with our school board. It feels good. It's baby steps. We always say within our organization, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Yeah.
You mentioned the logo that politicians could put on. Is that specific to the mom's organization, or is that? It seems like if the different advocacy organizations work together, they can create a logo that.
This one is specific to Moms Demand Action.
Okay. Is
Yeah.
there another one that would be kind of over an umbrella of that?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Not one that I'm aware of. I know that Sandy Hook Promise works with works legislatively as well. I don't believe they have a similar program though.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know in the past, the Bloomington group has put out information about someone having seen someone armed in a store or a business.
Yep.
And one thing that I think was encouraged was you can go to the manager and say, you know, stop, you know, can you do something about this? And also the Moms Demand Action has actually met with store owners and so forth to talk to them about, it's still legal, right, for a store owner to say
Yes.
no guns allowed here?
Yes. Yeah. So we have done quite a bit of that. A lot of business owners don't know that they can put a sign on their door, and it just the picture of the gun with the line through it and saying, you know, no guns allowed is not actually legally binding. It has to have the trespass code underneath it, and that then gives them legal right to ask the person to leave. Now, when we're talking about like Kroger or Target, an individual store isn't going to do anything. You know, we get we've got to talk to corporate about it. We worked on Kroger for so long just to get corporate to discourage people from bringing firearms in. But we do have, locally, we do a fun thing. We call it No Guns in Bars, where we go, because you really shouldn't be having firearms where there's alcohol served, and especially if you're bringing your families in. So we go to restaurants that have bars or serve alcohol, or sometimes we just go to bars. We have a night out and make it a social, fun night. But then we ask to speak to a manager, and we explain to them, hey, did you know you can do this? Here's a sign right here. Actually, Malcolm Abrams from Bloom Magazine had designed one. He gave us permission to use it, so we passed that out to the business owners. And we have had some businesses say we had no idea. In fact, one business that we visited after a gun had been left in their restroom said, well, the police told us we can't do that. So the police didn't know. So we visited last Little Five weekend. There was that shooting at the Ka'ala nightclub. We went to them a couple months later, and we said, did you know you could do this? And they were really hungry for it. So we haven't been doing it as much, obviously, since the pandemic, but we're getting back into it a bit now. And we even had Kilroy's on Kirkwood agree to put one up. But we noticed a week later it was gone. So we got to go back. But yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You can tell the store manager that you're not going to trade with them anymore if they let guns in here.
I boycotted
Get them where they
Kroger for
earn the
about a year.
most money.
Yeah, I boycotted Kroger for about a year. This was when Marsh was an option, and that was a tough year. I had a newborn. I wasn't familiar with Marsh. My kids weren't happy. A year later, and I was spending more money. A year later, I went back to Kroger because I was like, we're not doing any good. And my kids still haven't forgiven me. They're disappointed in me. But yeah, we can try that, and you know, we need large numbers to be successful with that. Does anybody else have a question? All right. Oh, did you have?
Okay, so please forgive my ignorance. I'm not really, familiar with this topic in terms of, I don't have any experience of, like having such an issue in my community. I mean, in the nation, in Turkey. So when you tell like a common American person that your gun will be taken away, like does he feel it as a threat to his freedom, or does he feel insecure? Like what's the core feeling or motive that kind of turns him against you know, like the cause that you guys are serving. Because I cannot like think of, like in Turkey, people, everybody can have like a gun without, you know, very, you know, let's say poorly, you know, like formulated laws, or, you know, so it's,
Yeah.
I'm just
Do you
trying to
mean
understand.
specifically with the red flag laws, when somebody's in crisis removing their firearm? I don't know how they react, to be honest. I get that, I bet they get pretty mad, but that's just conjecture. That's my guess. Yeah,
I would just like to comment that I grew up as a baby boomer. The only weapons I ever saw were toy guns. It happened that the family that I knew best and hung out with the kids, 3 brothers, the father was an FBI agent, so yes, he had a weapon that he used in his work. But he also, and I think it's my impression was that somehow everybody, including me, knew that you had to assume 2 things. You had to assume it was loaded, and assume that, and you had to never point it at someone. That might even, among some people, include your toy gun.
yeah.
And now it just seems like gun owners
A lot of gun owners will counter that saying, well, like I said, for the most part, gun owners want to be responsible. They're happy to lock their guns up for the most part. A lot of them just aren't educated that they need to do that, which is part of our campaign. Some will argue, though, I've had this conversation many times, where, well, no, they need to leave it out and loaded in case there's an emergency, you know. And then they'll say, but I've taught my kids not to touch it. You know, my kids know not to play with it. Well, really? And also, unfortunately, there are so many stories of like a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old finding it on the nightstand. You can't tell a 2-year-old not to touch that. It's tragic.
But my impression is also in my childhood, the NRA was very active in gun safety.
They've changed. Yeah, that has changed in the 70s and 80s. It took a turn. Well, thank you all very, very much. There's my email address. If anybody thinks of any questions later, or you need to know anything about Moms Demand Action, feel free to reach out and contact me. And I thank you all so much.